Welcome to Based on a True Story, the podcast that compares your favorite Hollywood movies with history. Today we're going to learn about Disney's Miracle. Now, as of this recording, Miracle is the most requested movie atop my list of listener requests, so you're probably already familiar with it, but just in case it's been a little bit since you've seen the movie, let's do our normal synopsis anyway. Directed by Gavin O'Connor, Miracle is a 2004 sports film starring Kurt Russell as Coach Herb Brooks. And it tells the story of the 1980 U.S. Olympic men's ice hockey team and their journey to winning the gold medal at the Winter Olympics in Lake Placid, New York. The film begins with Herb Brooks interviewing for the head coach position for Team USA and bringing his new approach emphasizing speed, conditioning, and teamwork. From the beginning, the U.S. team is built around defeating the best hockey team in the world at the time, the team from the Soviet Union. Brooks selects the college athletes for his team and puts them through rigorous training, focusing on team chemistry and downplaying individual egos. Things start off rough for Team USA as they struggle in exhibition games, but there are some glimmers of hope. Then, after being defeated in an exhibition game against the Soviet Union, Team USA just keeps pushing even harder. As the Olympics begin, all that hard work pays off as Team USA wins several preliminary matches and advances to the medal round. Their most significant game is a rematch against the Soviet Union, now known as the Miracle on Ice, hence the name of the movie. To help us separate fact from fiction, today we'll be on the phone with Lou Vairo. Now, Lou has a lot of insider knowledge about the true story behind the movie because he was there for many of the actual events that we see in the movie during his role as a scout for the 1980 Team USA. And then for the next Winter Olympics in 1984, he took over as the head coach for Team USA. So we'll be sure to ask him about that too. And speaking of today, Lou has a brand new autobiography out today that's called Lou Vairo, the Godfather of U.S. Hockey. Grab your copy right now using the link in the show notes. Now, before we call up Lou on the phone, we need to set up our game, Two Truths and a Lie. Now, if you're new to the show, here is how it works. I'm going to give you three things. Two of them are true, and that means one of them is just an all-out lie. Are you ready? Okay, here they are. Number one, players on Team USA were starstruck by Soviet players. Number two, Lou says Miracle does not accurately describe the 1980 Olympics USA hockey team. Number three, Team USA beat the Soviet Union 4-3 in the gold medal game. Got him? Okay, now as you're listening to our story today, your challenge is to identify which one is a lie. And of course, we'll do a recap at the end of the episode to see how well you did. All right, now as I mentioned briefly before, our episode today is a phone call. So if you're watching the video version of this, you will not see Lou's video. But with that said, now it's time to connect with Lou Vairo about the historical accuracy of Miracle. Before we dig into some of the details of the movie, one thing I like to do is to take a step back and look at the movie from an overall perspective. So if you were to give Disney's Miracle a letter grade for how accurately it captured the essence of the true story, what would it get?
Hey, when I saw them, and I waited until weeks ago to even see the movie. I never wanted to watch it because I lived it. But I remember Patty Brooks, Herb's wife, telling me it was an excellent portrayal, and several of the players really liked the movie, and people that were there and I worked with there all saw it, and they thought it was very accurate, and it was. I had to agree with them all.
Now, at the very beginning of the movie, it sets up the story. We see Kurt Russell's version of Herb Brooks being chosen to coach Team USA in the 1980 Olympics. What really stood out to me about this in the movie was the timeline, because we see Coach Brooks getting the job about 8 months before the Olympics are to start, and that doesn't really seem like a lot of time to recruit players, build a team expected to compete on an international level. So as I was watching that part of the movie, on one hand, we know movies tend to build extra drama and tension a lot of times. And on the other hand, it's not like the Olympics really sneak up on anyone less than 8 months or a year beforehand. So I couldn't help but think that maybe this was an example of the movie trying to build up drama by making it seem like the 1980s U.S. Olympic team was just assembled in 8 months. How accurate is the movie's portrayal of building the U.S. hockey team just 8 months before the 1980 Olympics started?
It was accurate. We had what they call the National Sports Festival, which the Olympic Committee put together. So we brought in 80 players in July of 79 to Colorado Springs. And we had 4 teams, and we were able to, of course, it's summertime, but we were able to fairly evaluate the players. And also, an interesting thing was that it's not like it was years ago when guys weren't in any kind of shape in the summer. Kids today skate year-round. They go to gyms. They go to different programs. So, they're pretty well committed to hockey by the age of 17, 18. They finally figure that's the sport they want to concentrate on. So they're year-round in pretty good shape. It was a great sports festival. It was at the Air Force Academy rink, which is fantastic. And it was very helpful in the selection process. Plus, Herb was a very active coach and coached in the WCHA, the Minnesota Gophers. They were national champions, and he knows all the players. He knew most of the players on the different teams. So it was okay. It worked out okay, the time frame.
Okay, yeah, we see that some in the movie. We see them in Colorado Springs a little bit before the Olympics, a few months before. And now you were involved in scouting for the team, which we don't really see a lot in the movie. According to the movie, it almost seems like Coach Brooks was the one to decide who made it onto the team. So as I was watching that, I again got the impression that the movie was maybe oversimplifying the process. Can you fill in some more context around your involvement in helping the 80 Olympic team come together?
Yes. Herb did make all the final decisions, which he should make. That he has to answer if it's a failure or a success. He's the guy that answers. He was very... He wanted a skating team. He knew the ice surface would be larger. He wanted a good skating, technically sound hockey team. My role didn't... Here's how I got involved. I was friends with Herb because I coached junior hockey in Minnesota and brought a different style of hockey to the what's now the USHL. Then it was called the Midwest Junior League, and we were national champions. And we had a lot of college coaches follow us, the players, watch us play, including Herb. So I got to know all these guys, and he got to know me, and he liked what we did at that time in Austin, Minnesota. He really liked it. He'd come to practice sessions. He'd invite my team up on Monday nights. We'd go sometimes during the season, play against this JV, Williams Arena in Minnesota on the, on the college ground. And so I got to know him real well. He got to know me. I never heard of the guy, and he never heard of me. Why would he? Before I came to Minnesota. And I only came here because of an old player of mine recommended me for the job, and lo and behold, they gave it to me. I didn't pursue it. It was all accidental, really. But anyway, but Herb would often consult with his people. Great Patrick. Craig was a great assistant coach, great communicator, perfect go-between for Herb and the players. Herb was a disciplinarian, demanding and tough, but fair and honest. Good coach, excellent coach. And my role came about, I was coaching the under-20 junior national team in 79. In December 79, our games were in Sweden. I think they were in Sweden. Was it 79 or 80? I can't even remember. But on the way overseas, Herb asked me if I would stop in Lake Placid. There was a 4-nation tournament. The B teams, national B team of Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, it was one country then, and Sweden. And my boss said, that'd be fine, do it. So I did it, and I was in Lake Placid. The first period I was watching between Sweden and the USA, and Sweden was doing something that seemed to, in their own end, coming out that was disruptive to our players and unusual. They were sending a weak side winger out high when we had the puck in their own end. And it caused the defenseman on that side to go back, and he cut across the ice, and the other D got nervous. He went back. And what Sweden did was they created a man advantage in their own end, 4 against 3, and they always had an open man they could pass to and walk out of the zone. Killed our forecheck. And I noticed it, and I mentioned it to Bob Fleming, who was chairman of the Olympic team. He's basically the guy that selected Bird to coach it. And Bob was sitting a couple of seats away from me, and I was writing that down on a print diagram I had with me. And he said, "What are you writing?" And I explained it, and he said, "Can I have that?" I said, "Yeah, go get me." The period ended, and Herb came out from the dressing room where the benches were, and he said, "Lou, come on down a minute." So I did. We said, "Explain to me what you saw." And I told him. He said, "Okay, good, very good." And they made an adjustment. I suggested something. He liked the suggestion. Usually they knew it anyway, and it's just reaffirmed. Because when you're sitting above and looking down, you see a lot, not sometimes, all the time, you can see more than the coach on the bench. You're making line changes, you're walking back and forth. You can't always see the entire surface of the rink, but as an eye in the sky, you can. It's a very good way to scout. So based on that, from that, he kept in touch with me during the season when they would play exhibition games. I'd get called every once in a while at home, and he would ask me if I been following the team. I said yes. And then when I got back from the World Junior, he asked me if have I seen anybody that I thought could help the team? And I told him, yeah, there's a few players. I gave him some names. But he had made a commitment when they picked the 26 players in Colorado Springs that he would honor it, that the team of 20 would come from that, and the players held them accountable. He wanted to make change, and I supported him on that. But the players, led by Ruzioni, did the right thing, and they said, no, that's not the deal. We put up with your for 6 months. We're going to, we can win a medal. We can win the gold medal. Leave us alone. Just leave us together. He called me and told me the next day. That happened at a meeting, I believe, in Dallas. They were playing the Dallas team in the Central Hockey League. Doesn't exist anymore, the Central League. It was a good league. And anyway, I said, well, that's perfect. You happen to be right. He says, yeah, I know they are. And I said, not only are they right, they've now taken responsibility and accountability for their upcoming performance. That's great. And he honored that, and it was great, and it did work. So anyway, from all of those interactions, he said, are you coming to the Olympics? I said, I am. I'm going to help. I'm going to help with all the things that have to be done at the Olympics. I'm going to be coming as an employee of USA Hockey. There were only 4 of us at the time, and we were all there. So he came up with the idea, what if you sit upstairs and we use a walkie-talkie from the band to the bench to Craig Patrick, and anything you say to Craig, and he can relay to me. And also, I'm going to want you to come down after each period and meet with you every morning in the dressing room and go over the different teams and who the next team is we play, etc. And he said, our first game is against Sweden. So I thought about that when he said that. I went to my boss, Hal Trumbull. I said, Hal, have you selected a team host for Sweden when they come over before the Olympic Games start and they travel and play exhibition games? He said, no, not yet, but I'm working on that right now. Why? And I told him, I said, I should be the team host. I can meet them at the airport, take them to the different venues and watch all their practices and games and get a feel for the team. I know the coach, Tommy Sandling, very well. And I know the team leader, Okie Lindstrom. And Hal said, very good. That's excellent. A good idea. And I called Herb and told him. He said, perfect. Do it. And I did. That's what I did. So it was a great team, the Swedish team. I was with them for 3 weeks. I never saw them miss a pass, not in practice or games. They were unbelievable. They might have been the most technically skilled team, better than anybody in all the basic fundamentals, skating, passing, receiving, combination play. They were good. And they had great young players. They had Deli Lindbergh in goal. They had Mats Naslund. They had Thomas Eriksson, Thomas Janssen, many others. I mean, that was a great team. And I think they won the bronze medal. So they had to be pretty damn good. So anyway, that's how that all came about. And it worked. I don't know how much I contributed, but I did my best. I think I did more to contribute in helping. I mean, these are good hockey men, Herb and Greg Patrick. They know what they're seeing. But it does help when you have another set of eyes. It just gives you more confidence into what you think you're seeing. But the big thing is, about it, we had every area covered. He didn't know if it was legal or not. And Bob Fleming had gotten permission from some agency, I don't know what they call it, SAA or something, that we could do that. But I don't know if we had permission or we even asked the International Ice Hockey Federation or Olympic Committee if you're allowed to do it or not. Just did it. And so I think we just wanted to keep that quiet, I guess. I don't know for sure. I don't see anything illegal or wrong with it, but who knows? And that's really why. And then besides that, it wasn't me. It was that great team and their coaching staff. And I feel bad sometimes that the goalie coach, Warren Strelo, never gets mentioned. He was outstanding, just outstanding with Jimmy Craig and Janusek. And he was one of the great goalie coaches I've ever met anywhere in the world. And a good guy, funny guy, terrific man. And him and Herb were very close friends. And I know Herb appreciated him, but Warren was more in the background. But that's how that went down. That's how that all happened. And it was good because after the first period, I came downstairs. I sat in a little box upstairs. Mondale came, the vice president, to some games, and I looked into my box, and there was the vice president, Mondale, and Secret Service agent, and there was snipers, guys with guns, rifles, laying on the beams above us in the stadium. Can you imagine that? And here I am sitting there with a walkie-talkie watching the game. It was weird. And he was a real nice guy, the vice president, very nice man. I introduced myself. He asked me what I was doing. I told him. I knew who he was. He introduced himself and all that. He was a pleasant guy. And from Minnesota, of course, and he was a big hockey fan. And that's how that went down. I had one of the best views of that whole Olympics. And I will tell you this, behind the scenes too. I felt my best contribution was just being Herb's friend. Was after the first period of the Swedish game, 1-1, he was pacing downstairs. There was outside the dressing room, there was an exit, and the staircase, nobody used it. And it was big glass windows overlooking the speed skating oval. And I would meet him in that little area there, just the two of us. Nobody bothering us. Nobody could hear us. He'd lean back against the wall. He had his pencil and pad, and he'd lift one foot and put it against the wall and stand there. And I'd stand in front. He would ask me, "What'd you see? What do you think?" Like that. But he was pacing this time, and he was very nervous. I said, "What's the matter?" "Oh, Efren Johansson, meaning Kenny, was his GM. They didn't get along. Kenny was a great guy, and he loved Herb, but they were both alpha guys, and they argue with each other about everything. And he said, that schedule, we're finished. We can't play with this team. We're exhausted. I said, easy, calm down. Herb, you're playing the best skating team in the tournament, the best technical team in the tournament. These guys are good. I told you, I spent 3 weeks with them. They're good, but they're beatable. We skated with them in this period. Well, we just got to go up a notch. And we're well prepared. We're playing good. We're playing really well. He said, you think so? I said, yes. And I said, look, Herb, let me be very blunt with you. I'm glad I did this, by the way. I said, we got a chance to win a medal. I wasn't sure coming in. I'm not talking gold medal. I'm just saying we got a chance to win a medal. We need to win this game. This game is winnable right now. And you've done a great job with this team. These kids are good, but we have a young team, and the Swedish team is far more seasoned. A lot of these guys have played a lot of world championships and international events. But you've done a great job. You're a great coach, and stop worrying about Kenny. And he's my friend. Remember that. So be careful what you say. Stop worrying about him. You're a great coach, and you've done a great job. You can't do more than you've done. Just believe in the team. They believe in you. I believe in you. And he looked at me like stunned, and I'll never forget that look. And he said, do you really mean that? I said, 100%. Now let's go get him. And luckily, we got some breaks in the last minute. The Swedes could have easily cleared it off the boards and out. We lose that game. But we end up with a great goal by Baker, and Codwich was a key guy and all that. And we get the tie, and after that, it was fantastic. The confidence level. And, at the beginning, there weren't that many spectators. It wasn't even a full house that first game. People didn't believe in us. And a lot of the spectators were from foreign countries. Like, I knew the Soviet team was in trouble because I was downstairs right by their dressing room every day, and I could see the goings and comings, and I knew their guys. Boris Moyarov, the president of the federation, Viktor Tikhonov, Yuzinov, second coach, Vladimir Yuzinov. I knew all these guys, Andrei Starovoytov, the general secretary, and I could see they were nervous because whenever that bus would pull in for practice or games, there'd be 500 people shouting, waving flags of Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Eastern European countries. Russians would be the Soviets, and they'd be shouting at the players as they got off. Terrible words in some Russian language. They all studied Russian in school. And the Russians were not comfortable. They were never comfortable. They felt not scared, but very nervous. Like, why are these Americans treating us this way? Plus of Afghanistan, I guess, and all that. It wasn't good. It was for them. They were not a confident bunch that they normally are. I could see it. And it's never been reported, but that's the truth. And there were a lot of the fans came to cheer against them. Not cheer for anybody in particular, but then when our team started winning, they were cheering for us, of course. And even if you walk down Main Street in Lake Placid, I saw so many. I could tell by the way they dressed, their faces, and I hear their language. I know where they were from, and that was a big thing in that tournament. And it affected the Soviet team, for sure.
Well, I want to ask about the Soviet team, because in the movie, it seems like everything's from the perspective of Team USA, but we see bits and pieces here and there to learn that the Soviets have been dominant for like 15 years. I think there's even a bit of dialogue in there that talks about how some of the players on the Soviet team even played together in 15 years. And that just seems like such a stark contrast to the way the movie sets up Team USA, where, they've pretty much just started playing together for the past few months, and they're not professionals at all. They come from colleges and such. And so it just seems like there's this huge contrast that the movie is setting up between the Soviet team and the U.S. team. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah. And my feeling is this, and I've been a student of their hockey. My main mentor, teacher was the great Soviet coach, Anatoly Tarasov, great friend of mine. I'm still very close to his entire family that's left. And so I knew their hockey inside and out. In my lifetime, I've been to, starting with the Soviet Union, now Russia, 25 times. And I deal every day, basically, even now, with Russian guys, coaches, players I talk to. Some of my best friends, I just wrote a book, and I didn't write it. The author wrote it, but I gave him the information, and dedicating the book to my friend Yuri Kamenov, who died a couple of years ago. He was a great friend of mine. He played for the Central Army team and played for Tarasov and played with some of those guys. But anyway, it was a great team. It might have been the strongest Soviet team ever put together. You can make that argument. But they weren't comfortable. That's what I noticed. They just weren't comfortable. And that can have an effect on human nature, At our team, one of the things, I don't like the name Miracle. I don't like it at all. It was a great hockey team. Those players were outstanding. They were in great shape, as good a shape as any of the Soviets, who were in great shape. And we had two coaches, three with the goalie coach, Strela. They're as good as anybody in the world coaching hockey. They were terrific coaches. And our players were wonderful. If you look at the history of hockey in America, the sentiment, are you kidding me? Mark Johnson, he is a great hockey player. Mark Pavlich was a great hockey player. Neil Broughton, probably my favorite all-time player. Great hockey player. Then you had Wells, who had a specific job, and Herb used him perfectly as a defensive centerman. He was a terrific guy. And then moving Dave Christian back to defense a month before the Olympic Games was brilliant. And I credit Gordon, Jimmy Christensen, that was his nickname. He suggested to her to put David back on defense. He said he's a centerman. He said he's anything. He's a winger, defenseman. He can even play goal. Just trust him. Put him on defense. He'll get the puck out of his zone. He can work it because he can stay. Yeah, it Ramsey, Baker, and O'Callahan, and Studer, and Morrow. This was a wonderful team. And Jim Craig was an outstanding goalie, and he probably played the best 20 days or 18 days, whatever the tournament took, of his life. I don't think he ever played better before or since. And it's a shame that he was an outstanding goalie, but he really rose to the occasion. So it wasn't a miracle to me. It was doable, but if you I had to play him 10 times, they'd probably win 6, 7 of the games, the Soviets. But our team that day against them was great. And that's all we had to be. Great that one day against them. You only played them once.
Yeah, well, I want to ask about that too, because in the movie we see before the Olympics, like I think it's 3 days in the movie, we see the Soviet team playing Team USA as kind of a warm-up game between them. So it doesn't really count. But according to the movie, the Soviet Union comes away with a 10-3 blowout victory against Team USA, and it really starts to add to the tension and drama in the movie, at least, of, are we doing the right thing, and kind of questioning everything up to that point. Can you share what the atmosphere was like around Team USA when they lost that?
That night of that game at Madison Square Garden, I was scouting, advanced scouting, and I had gone to Montreal. I drove up to Montreal, and I watched 2 games up there. Czechoslovakia, because that was our second game after Sweden. The Czechs played, I can't remember who, maybe Canada. I'm not sure. Then there was another game I watched. So I had gotten all my notes done, and there were no cell phones in those days, and I was driving back to Lake Placid from Montreal. It's only an hour's drive, and that's where I was going to check in at Lake Placid and be there for the Olympic Games. But I had no way of knowing what we did in New York against the Soviets in the exhibition game. And the next day I was able to reach Herb in New York and talk to him in his hotel. And he said, it was something, Lou. I said, what was the score? He told me, I think it was 10-3. I said, oh, how did we look? I mean, did we do anything right? He said, yes. He said, first of all, the kids were overwhelmed. I knew we were in trouble because when the public announcer was introducing the Soviet players, our guys were banging their stick for them on the ice, applauding each player as they got introduced. These are well-known players, that our kids knew of. And they were starstruck.
Some intimidation there.
Yeah. But he said, the thing that I liked was we could have played another game after that. Our conditioning has really been good. These kids have worked their ass off for me, and they were in great shape. I wasn't too worried. At least I knew we could skate with them. And I think the whole thing was overwhelming. Just overwhelmed us. The young kid, Madison Square Garden, packed house, chanting, applause. So he said, I think when we play him again, we'll be better. And we were. And it was interesting, It was fun to watch all these teams. But I had told him, I said, it's not the Soviet team is jittery. Hey, if we can ever get ahead of them, we can really cause them problems. Just they'll argue with each other. They fight with each other, People say, oh, they're so disciplined and that, but they're human beings. And they argue and blame each other and stuff. It's no different than any other country. But you never see that because they're never behind. They're always lead. They're always comfortable. And when they pulled Tradiak, I think that was a horrible decision. And he cannot blame Jazinov for it. Jazinov won't talk about it. I know him very well. He won't even, to this day, he doesn't want to talk about it. Every time I see him, he's still around. He's 82. He's a great guy, great hockey guy. I'll see him and say hello and greet and all that. I say to him, Lake Placid. And he goes crazy. He makes the fist waves at me. Oh, he goes crazy. So he's a real good guy.
Oh, that's funny. Well, if we go back to the movie's timeline, after the Olympics start, there are a number of games that the movie just shows very quickly before the big game. We see USA versus Sweden, talked about a little bit about that. That turns out to be a tie game. And then there's a 7-3 win over Czechoslovakia, 5-1 win against Norway.
Yeah, but that was the most unbelievable game for me in the whole Olympics. That was a great Czechoslovakian team. Yeah, and the night before the game, I invited the 3 Czech coaches. The last of the 3 just died 6 months ago. The head coach was Karol Gut, and the assistants were Dr. Ludek Pukac and Stanislav Nevesely, 3 outstanding players, former national team players, and great coaches and great guys, great hockey men. Karel Good later on became president of the Czechoslovakian Ice Hockey Federation before the split, and then he was president, I think, of the Czech Federation for a while too. And they have like buildings that they rent out different countries. They call it the U.S. house, Swedish house, or the Italian house. Well, I knew some of the people at the Italian house, and they loved me. And I'd bring them some pins and some little banners, USA, and they would feed me. And they bought their own food and chefs from Italy with them. So it was unbelievable. You can't find a restaurant as good anywhere in outside of Italy as good as this was. So they told me, I said, can I ever bring friends? They said, of course. You bring whoever you want. I brought 3 Czech coaches because they were all friends of mine. And we had a great dinner and great night. And I remember Bukac, he couldn't speak English Karel Good, but Bukac and Novoselic could. But with Karel Good, I can converse with him well enough in German. We could speak in German to each other well enough. And the other guys, I could speak in English because I don't know maybe a few words of Czech or Slovak, but not many. And Ludi said, I watched your team practice this morning. It practiced too hard, in my opinion. Coming off the game against Sweden and now play us tomorrow. And I remember Stanislav saying to me, I said, is everything good with your team? He said, no, not exactly. We lost Ivan Linka. Linka, we call him. Ivan Linka broke his leg. He was the key to our power play, and we just haven't gotten that resolved the way we'd like it. And quite frankly, we're worried about the Stasni's escaping. What do they call that? When they run away from the country, whatever that term is.
Defecting, is that right? Defecting.
Defecting, yeah. They're worried about defecting because they had a lot of, I would see them, their own Secret Service people traveling with those teams from the East countries, from the Soviet Union, etc. They had the credentials, and I would see them in the bowels of the arena, always outside the dressing room, watching every move of every part of the personnel. So they, and I liked the goalie. I think it was Kralik. I'm not sure. Yuri Kralik. He's okay, but he wasn't as good as previous Czechoslovakian goalies like Holdacek, even Zorilla. And I have to tell you, if I was going to predict, I would say I would have predicted the Czechs to win 5-3, 5-2, 4-2, something like that. They were really good. I mean, they're the only team that ever really beat the Soviets during the reign of success that the Soviets had. It was always Czechoslovakia that be the team that beat them. And in the 72 Super Series between the greatest Canadian NHL players against the greatest Soviet players, which wasn't really true because Hull, Howe, Bobby Orr, they weren't playing because they were injured or in the WHA, and they weren't allowed to play, which was stupid in the 72 series. And playing that 72 Soviet team, which did a great job, should have won it, really. Surprised? Well, I'm not surprised. They lost because of 2 great players, Phil Esposito and his brother Tony. I'll say it now, and I've said it forever. There should be a statue in front of every ice rink in Canada, a bronze statue of Tony in goal and Phil scoring. Those 2 brothers put Canada on their back and led them, willed them to that victory in 72. And so, Czechoslovakia was a great team, and they were the world champions that year. In 72, they had beat the Soviet team that was playing Canada. And then the Canadian team, on their way home after the 72 Summit Series, They played, and I believe they beat Czechoslovakia 3-2 in Prague. I believe that's pretty accurate, something like that. So I was stunned. When I saw us play like we did, we were flying. We were flying. And we beat them. We ran them out of the building 7-3. Then I knew we could win a medal, maybe the big one. And then the games against Romania, West Germany, Norway, I think that's who we played. And they weren't easy. Every country can put 15, 20 good players together. They weren't easy. We won them all without being too nervous, but they weren't easy. And then Finland, after we beat the Soviets, we had to beat Finland. And they had a goalie, Jorma Valtinen. Jorma is a Hall of Fame goalkeeper in the International Ice Hockey Federation Hall of Fame, one of the greats from Finland, the first of many great Finnish goalies. Jorma still coaches today. He's probably close to 80, coaches in Italy now, and he helped develop the great Finnish goalkeeping program that's produced all these great Finnish goalies the last 20 years or so. And I got to tell you a little side story about Jorma. We're still in touch with each other. Jorma, do you remember the plane from Yaroslavl that was going to St. Petersburg at the opening of the KHL season of a number of years ago that took off and crashed and everybody died? You remember that story?
I remember the story, yeah.
Yeah, and he was on that flight.
Oh, wow.
And they just announced, he told me the story. Fasten your seatbelt, and his cell phone rang, and it was his president of the club. He was working for Yaroslavl, teaching goalies. And Mr. Yakolev called him, and he said, "Are you in the air?" He said, "No, we're getting ready to take off." He said, "Tell him to stop." And he did. He yelled out, "Stop, don't take off," whatever. And what's going on? It's Mr. Yakolev. I have to get off the plane. We got 2 junior goalies just came in, and he wants me to work with them. So I'm not going to make the trip. And he got off, and by the time he got to the rink, the plane had crashed.
Wow.
Imagine that?
Wow. I couldn't imagine that. I don't know what the thought process would be around that. That's wow.
It wasn't meant to be. God intervened, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And he's still alive.
Yeah.
And that was such a tragedy. And boy, do they do a great job in Yaroslavl. Every single home game, they honored them, all that perished. It's beautiful how they did it. They still do it. It's very nice. Nice way to remember those poor people.
Well, you're talking about the Soviets kind of feeling like they were never really behind. And in the movie, we see the games from Team USA that you were talking about, but on the Soviet side, we don't really see a lot of their games, but we find out that they basically blew out their competition. I think they said they won all 5 of their games, scored like 51 goals.
No. They murdered Japan and a few teams. They had a very tough game against Finland and a very tough game against Canada.
Okay.
The key out of all this, I have to say the truth. You're interviewing me, I'm going to tell you the truth.
Yeah, no, that's what we're here for.
I'm just glad we never played Canada. For some reason, during the pre-Olympic games, exhibition schedule, Canada was tough for us to beat. There's something that's now, I think, overcome, but for a while, very psychological between, just like Slovaks and Czechs. Czechs seem to always beat the Slovaks, but now it's changing. And the Czechs are playing well, but it's changing. U.S. and Canada. Canada had maybe a subconscious little advantage over the U.S. Not that often. In the 1960 Olympics, under Coach Jack Riley, we beat Canada. Harry Sinden was playing. He might have been captain of the Canadian team. And Canada was not an easy team to play against. And they almost beat the Soviets, They gave them all they could handle. And uh, and Finland too. So we knew Finland was good, very good. And I knew Baltimore was great. I told her, I said, their goalie's good. We can't waste shots. We gotta score when we shoot. This guy is good. He's one of the best in the history of international hockey, one of the better goalies. So anyway, but her made that great speech. I was standing outside, but the locker room door was open. And the typical Brooks speech, and very typical, he said, what we did the other day against the Soviets, something like that, will mean nothing if we don't win today. This is a game we have to win, or believe me, you'll take it to your graves if we don't. You'll take it to your graves. That's very powerful words, and I couldn't describe it better. And and of course we won. Mark Johnson was spectacular. Dover Coda, these guys were good players.
At the kind of the climax of the movie at the end is that big game we kind of alluded to and talked about a little bit, but in the movie, the way it sets it up is because of the game beforehand at Madison Square where the U.S. got beat. Now there's all this tension here in the movie of, are they going to be able to beat the Soviet team? And throughout the movie shows bits and pieces back and forth. They're kind of going back and forth. There's a lot of action that's fun to watch. It doesn't focus on a lot of specific details, but it's a movie, so it's focusing on just showing a lot of the action of the game itself. But then as time starts to tick away towards the end of the game, the Soviets find themselves in a position that they're not familiar with, being down 4-3 in a game. And we start to sense in the movie something that you had kind of alluded to, was the Soviets started to look like they were not very comfortable. Can you share what the experience was like for that game?
They were very uncomfortable and very, very nervous. And when they pulled, all right, I thought Tretiak I always believed Tretiak to be one of the greatest goalies that's ever played the game. Really, physically, hardest working. Oh, God, he was a great goalie. Only guy that ever could score. Two guys could score against him without much trouble. Bill Esposito and Vaslav Nedomansky used to score against him. But most people have a tough time. I was on the ice with him. He's intimidating. He's so big and agile and quick. You think he's going to kill you. Well, he's in goal. You want to go in and shoot on him. He charges out at you. He scares the hell out of you. And he did me, I can tell you that. I'm not exactly Sonia Henning on Blade, but he scared the hell out of me in a practice once. But anyway, pulling him, to me, I think deflated their team a little bit and broke their confidence. Like, we depend on him. He's our man. And Mushkin, excellent goalie. People forget 1 year previous in the Challenge Cup at Madison Square Garden, it was best of three. It was tied at one game each. The NHL All-Stars against the same Soviet team. He could have started Mushkin in the game, which shocked everybody. Mushkin shut him out. I think 6-0. Which is pretty impressive. And Mushkin was a good goalie, but what I'm saying is I think it shook the team up. And Michael Luzioni, he's a hard-working guy, wonderful captain, a great leader for that team, but he was something else that he's never gotten the credit he deserves. He's a natural goal scorer. He can score goals anywhere he ever played. High school up, he's a goal scorer. He can bury the biscuit. And he scored a great goal against Mushkin, who was a great goalie too. Great goal for the winning goal. How do you not? Where's the miracle there? Yeah. This was a great goal scorer who scored a great goal. I want to see these kids get credit. Heard And Craig Patrick did a great job. And Warren Strelo, the equipment men, Smitty the train, all the team, Dr. Nagy, all the guys, great guys. But the truth of the matter is, they weren't a miracle team. They played the game of their lives against the Soviets, and they played a wonderful, wonderful Olympic competition. They were great. Just like our 60 team, they were great. We've had other teams that played well and great, but none of the other teams won the gold medal. These two teams did, and they should be saluted for their excellence.
Just a good team, yeah.
No, it's a great team. I coached a lot of those players myself on teams. I know how good they were.
Yeah.
And they had and I've said this and I'll say it again and again. I don't believe any other coach would have won the gold medal with that team but Brooks. He was just the right, perfect coach at the perfect timing. I often told him, I said, if you would have coached in 76 or 84, you wouldn't be a legend. You'd be like me at dummies. You wouldn't be a legend. Timing it matters. Everything has to be right. Just go right for any team to win a gold medal in the Olympics, not just that we did. Everything has to go right. You got to get bounces. You got to be healthy. It just has to work. Guys have to play at the top of their game for 2 weeks of their life. And this team did it. And I salute the coaches. They didn't get in the way and mess it up. It made it better. And Craig Patrick did a great job in his role, supporting Herb all year long. It was Estrella, he can coach goalies. So that's my take on it anyway.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask about the Soviets when they replaced their goalie, since the movie kind of focuses on the U.S. side of things, not as much from the Soviet side. You mentioned that kind of seemed to deflate the Soviets, but according to the movie, it seems to be like a morale boost for Team USA. Was that kind of the point in the game where you felt, wow, we might actually win this thing?
Yeah, but you know what really, when Mark Johnson scored at the end of the period, I think it was David Christian, flipped the puck up in the air and was onside, and Mark, the two defensemen, Yeletinov and Tervukin on the Soviet side, and even Tradiak, they kind of let up. And Mark was right between them, grabbed the puck, and deked out Tradiak and scored. To me, that's when I said, oh, we could win this game. We got a shot. And, there was tension still. And like, oh God, I liked Herb's comment, the last 10 minutes of the game, he said, were the longest 10 minutes of my life. And I felt the same way. I mean, I just kept looking at the clock, move. They put on a rush. They hit the crossbar, I think, and maybe the post. Malsev was in there, Petrov, Alamov. They're a great team. I can comfortably say that I think that might have been the greatest Soviet team I've ever seen, at least on paper. But they didn't have a great tournament, and they still, I think, would they win the silver? And they weren't comfortable. Those people from the eastern countries upset them.
Yeah, you were talking about that before, where they didn't feel comfortable the whole time, but it's still...
No, and I was outside their dressing room a lot, and I remember when they beat Canada or Finland, I can't remember which team, the game ended and it was a tough game for them. And as they were walking in, something I never saw coaches do before, but it's, we're talking different cultures here too. Soviet culture was not the Canadian or the American culture. But Tikhonov was standing outside the dressing room door, and as each player was coming in off the ice at the end of the game, he was greatly relieved. He would kiss each player on the lips. He would Russians do that, part of their culture. Men kiss men on the lips, relatives and friends, and as they came in, he would kiss them and he would hold their shoulders and he would say, "Bolshai spasiba." Great thanks. Many, many great thanks. Each player, they were so relieved to have won that game. Though I knew they were vulnerable. I felt it all along. I'd been there enough times. I knew their culture. I knew their nervousness. And I kept saying, they're never in the position to win lucky. They're usually ahead by 3-4 goals going into the third period. I'd like to see how they're going to react when things are not going good. And that's that's part of it,
We don't see a lot from the Soviet side in the movie, but the movie seems to imply, as I mentioned earlier, that they were kind of blowing out their opponents, but you mentioned that they weren't necessarily. So at the point at which the Soviets were playing the U.S., do you think that kind of the atmosphere of the games had changed overall?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The building was now packed. Everybody waved flags. All the front runners showed up. They weren't there at the beginning. They all showed up. And in the streets, all these people, I had a USA jacket, and I didn't live in the Olympic Village. I lived outside of it because I wasn't an official part of the team. And I'd walk the streets. I knew everybody from these different countries because working with USA Hockey is part of my job. And just walking around, they'd see USA jacket. People would come up to me, hug me, kiss me. Well, some women brought me flowers, and they would say with their accents, "Thank you, thank you, thank you, America." They were so thrilled to see the Russians get beat and us have a chance for the gold medal. It was never talked about, never spoken about, but there's people, they're immigrants to our country, and here they were cheering for us against their old people, against people who they felt invaded their country and held them hostage. So it was interesting.
There was a point in the movie, I don't remember the specific dialogue to it, but it becomes pretty obvious that there's more than just the game itself. The movie doesn't get into politics or anything like that, so we don't focus on politics either, but there is a point where Kurt Russell's version of Coach Brooks says something like, "We're about to play the greatest team in the world. Can't we just leave it at that?" But it seems pretty obvious that there's something else to the Soviet Union playing the United States in the Olympics game that's going to have external impacts. Did that imply a lot of extra pressure to the team?
No, I'd say no. I think most of them didn't care. Most people, young people like that, they just want to live their life. And these kids were looking to become pros or move on with their life to the next stage, whatever that might be. I don't think so. No, I think that some probably, some it probably affected more than others, but most no. And I dealt with the Soviets a lot, and if you're dealing with bureaucrats and you're dealing with politicians, it's never pleasant in any realm. But if you deal with the people, it is just the people. They're no different than we are. It could be Russian, Ukrainian, Polish, Italian, Irish, Swedish, and it doesn't matter. Argentinian, it doesn't matter. Canadian. All people basically want to do is live their lives. They want to have a job, a decent job, raise their family, go to the beach for 2 weeks in the summer, have food on their table, follow their favorite sports teams, maybe have a dacha in Russia or some of the European countries outside of a big city where they have a little garden and a place in the summer, a retreat to go to on weekends. That's all people want. really, the average person, they don't get deeply involved in the international politics of everything. And if you follow it on the news, you know as well as I do, the way the news has deteriorated now. It's half the newscasts, more than half the newscasts are politically slanted. And you don't even know if you're getting honest reports from either side of the political spectrum. No, I don't think politics. I think underneath the surface, when Carter's saying we're not going to go to Russia for the Summer Olympics and the invasion of Afghanistan, yeah, it bothered. We did the same thing years later, and we got chased out just like Soviets did. No, we gotta find politicians that look to create peace, not fighting. Because general people in general are just people that the same everywhere. They just want to live their lives.
Well, because the movie focuses so much on that game against the Soviets, as you mentioned earlier, it wasn't like Team USA was done. They had one more game against Finland, but the movie doesn't really focus on that too much. So can you fill in some more details that we don't see in the movie about the actual gold medal game for Team USA against Finland?
Yeah, I can tell you that Herb was very concerned and worried that there'd be a letdown, and that's why he made that great speech in the room. And I think we had very good leadership from Luzioni and Prokota and these guys on the team, some of the team leaders of the team. Jimmy Craig was zoned in, focused in, and Mark Johnson. You know, like I told you, history of USA hockey, I would put them in the top 6-7 centermen we ever had in our hockey till this day. You got to have Johnson, Pavlich, and Blocky. And they got the job done against a great goalie, Valtonen, and from Finland, and a good Finnish team. So we did great. And like I told you, we had the right coaches at the right time for the right team. And it was in the right place. You know, we won 2 gold medals in our history in the Olympics. And one was in Squaw Valley, California, the other Lake Placid, and the silver in Salt Lake City. When you play in the other countries, it's a little tough. And I think I've been about 6 Olympics, so I have a feel for it. And we did great. Of course we were nervous. I kept saying to myself, let's not blow it now. But when I heard her words, you'll take it forever to your graves, it got me fired up. I remember, because normally I would leave in enough time to walk up a bunch of steps and get to my little booth. After he said that, that was enough for me to hear. I ran up the steps. I was juiced. I was fired up. You know, those were perfect words for him to come up with.
Yeah, and then all ready to go and ready to bring it home and actually finish off and get the gold.
Oh, what a relief that was to do that. It was such a relief. Oh, my God, it was so great. It really was. I cried.
Yeah, I could see it. Really emotional, just letting it out.
I almost cried with this interview a few times. I get choked up. Those memories were great. To see such joy on the faces of the players and the fans. It's great. And it's important to this day because I still coach little kids, off-ice training, 9, 10-year-olds, and they all saw a miracle 150 times each, and they all know it. They always ask me about, did this really happen, Coach Lou? Or whatever, and I tell them, yeah, it's all true, boys. And if you girls, because we have girls now playing, and if you guys ever want to get to that position, you got to work as hard as those kids did, and not just as hard, as smart. And we're giving you stuff here to learn, and You got to practice it at home on your own also. And they get all fired up. They love it.
Well, the movie ends after the 1980 Olympics, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, following up in the 1984 Olympics, after, Herb Brooks was not coaching Team USA. You were the head coach of U.S. hockey that year. Did you feel any pressure following as the movie puts it, the miracle team from 1980?
Yes. Let me tell you a little story that's interesting. There was no preordained coach. I didn't even want to do it. Nothing like that. What happened was nobody wanted to coach. I gave names. I wasn't officially on the search committee, but I gave names to the search committees. And I can't remember exactly. Art Berglund is dead now, but Art told me how many. 5 or 6 coaches they asked. Well-known names. Coach the team. They all refused. Different reasons. Legitimate. I can't leave my college team for a year. I don't want to do that. And whatever the thing might have been. And Ron DiGregorio, Art Berglund, and Fayette Tutter was the president of USA Hockey. It was called AHOUS, the Amateur Hockey Association of the United States. They said to me, "You've coached the junior national team. You were with Herb in Lake Placid. You've worked with Bob Johnson. You worked with the best. And you know the European teams better than anybody we have. And you know our player pool. Would you like to coach the team?" And I said, no. I wasn't afraid. I didn't feel I earned it. And, I was still pretty young. I don't know, 36, whatever. I said no. And Art is the one who convinced me. He said, "Lou, you never get another chance to do that. Anybody can coach anywhere. But to coach an Olympic team is special. And we need you. We need you." And Fayette Tutt was a favorite person of mine. He was a funny little old guy, good guy, smart and everything, but also just a good guy. And he was always so nice to me. He said, "Lou, coach the team." So they interviewed me, and they interviewed Tim Taylor. And in the interview, I said, "Give it to Timmy. And if he needs help, I'll help. He's more qualified than I am." And when they interviewed Timmy, he said, "Give it to Lou." I'll help. That's
of course.
The true story. Finally, Art Berglund wore me down, and I agreed to do it. And I have absolutely zero regrets. I'm really happy I did it. I had a great team. But of course, when I agreed, I had looked at the depth chart, and I saw some of the players that we had. We'd have Bobby Carpenter. We'd have Buttsy Erickson, Brian Mullen, Craig Ludwig, Phil Housley, Tom Barrasso, Johnny Van Beek. I can't remember all the names now, but pretty good players. They all signed. They didn't want to wait a year and a half, whatever. Well, I don't blame them. I didn't blame them at all. They all signed. Barrasso signed. He got kidnapped by the Buffalo Sabres during our training camp in Alaska. We were playing the Soviet wings. They came up and they stole him and flew him back on a private plane to Buffalo and signed him. And that year he won first All-Star, I think, Rookie of the Year, Desmond Award. He's 18 years old. He was a high school player. And I wish they would have said something to me. I wouldn't have stopped him. I couldn't have anyway, but I wouldn't have. I liked Tom. He turned out to be a great goalie. And I had no problem with the goalies we had left. Mason and Barron were great. They were great. Loved them. But, I mean, it could have been different. Who knows if it would have been different? Aaron Broughton, another one. Up until 5-6 years ago, he was the all-time leading scorer of the New Jersey Devils. These guys would have been on our 84 team, except they all signed. And again, don't blame them the least bit. Never held anything against them. But it would have been a little bit of a different team. And it still was a great team. It's Chelios, Pat LaFontaine, Eddie Olchek, David Jensen, two of them, H&A, Tommy Hirsch, the Fusco brothers. Oh, that was a great team. Gary Sampson, Scotty Bukestead. These guys could play. They could play. They could play better than I could coach, I'll tell you that. They could play. And they were that was the youngest team ever. I mean, Al Iafredi, I think, and Olchuk. These guys, I think 8 of our players could have played on the junior national team. It was a young team, a very young team, and they went on, many of them, to great careers. Injuries caused problems for a few others. But I love that team, and my sadness with that team is we only lost, how many games? We only lost 2 games in the Olympics. You could lose to Czechoslovakia and Canada, in close games. That's possible. And it wasn't Republic of this and the Republic. You didn't play Panama and Guatemala. You played great countries in hockey and out of our country. But those kids were so young. I had 3 kids in high school, 3 or 4 kids still taking high school classes, living with built families. And I used to check their homework. That's the way it was. And of course, the expectations were tremendous. And our record was 2 wins, 2 losses, 2 ties. I could live with that. And the only reason it upsets me is the world didn't see what a good team this was. This was a good team. We beat a lot of NHL teams in preseason exhibition games. And you can't do that. And we beat Soviet teams in exhibition games. And you can't do that if you weren't good. If the players weren't good. Can't happen.
Yeah, it makes sense, though, that you'd have that.
It was a great experience. I'm glad I did it now. I look back and I'm happy I did it.
Yeah. No, that's great. It's funny that you didn't want to do it, and the other guy didn't want to do it, and it's almost like a game of hot potato. Like, no, I don't want it. You take it. But in the end, it sounds like it was great.
Because if you don't win a gold medal, you're a failure.
Right. That's where I was. Yeah, that was the impression that I got. It would be like, because you're following up with a team that won the gold medal. It's like, well, what else can you do? There's nowhere to go but down.
I tell people it's the second greatest thing I ever did in my life, that I'm proud of, that I did it. And I'm glad that I took I wasn't afraid to take the risk. I wanted our hockey to be great in America. That's why I worked for USA Hockey. I've seen it grow from nothing to something great that it is today. I was very proud of it, but, there's more important things than winning games. I always say I got drafted in 1966 to the Army, 2 years. That's the greatest achievement personally that I ever had, serving my country. That I cherish as the most wonderful gift. Then the hockey comes second. And of course your family and God comes before anything. That's the way I look at life. Simple.
Well, thank you for your service in the military. And thank you for coming on to chat about the movie Miracle. I want to shift a little bit before I let you go to talk about your new autobiography. I'll make sure to add a link to it in the show notes for this if anybody's listening and wants to get a copy. But can you give listeners a little peek in your new book and maybe share one of your favorite stories from it?
The most fun I had was Mike said, Lou, we gotta have testimonials. I didn't even know what he meant. I thought I died. I said, what do you mean a testimonial? He said, call up some people in hockey or players, ex-players, and get them to send in a few sentences about you, meaning me. I said, I can't do that. I'm afraid to do it with some of them. God knows what they'll live. So I went to people I worked with, Jay Riley, Jack Riley's son. We worked together with national teams years ago. He sent a nice piece in. You think I only destroyed hockey in America? I coached the national teams of Italy and Holland also. So I destroyed hockey in 3 countries. So I called. He has a big job in Holland now with a former national team player. Uh, he wrote a nice thing in, and I asked Phil Housley, Soviet player, very close friend of mine, and guy I go back 40 years with, Igor Larionov, Phil Esposito, Chris Chelios, just to name a few. Those are pretty big names. These are all Hall of Fame guys. And very nice thing, Jim Craig. They wrote beautiful things. It was very touching to me. And I didn't know they felt that way, and I was even afraid to ask them. God knows what they'd write. And Pat LaFontaine wrote the forward for the book. It's beautifully written, what he wrote. It's very touching to me, emotional. And you don't realize it, but you never think of yourself as making a difference in anybody's lives. But these guys claim I did. So it's just humbling, very humbling. I don't like to talk about myself like that. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting book, and I think a fun read. It's me, and I'll tell you something else. I can't stand when I hear people say I've been misquoted, or I've been, what's the other word? It's not what I said. Or shut up. I've done a million interviews in my life, and I've said some things later on a few times that I might have regrets for, but I've never been misquoted, period. What you say is what you say, and you can't run away from it. You got to deal with it. And if you did something that you regret, then you can apologize. But you can't say I've been misquoted and blame it on the reporter. That's not right, at all. So yeah, there's a few things in there probably that'll raise some eyebrows. I don't care. I said them, and so I said it. I'll live with it. No, but I'll tell you one little story. It's not in the book. I could write a book just on some of the things, little stories from different people, but this was funny. I had an 18-city tour in the United States in 1979 that I organized because teams weren't doing dry land training specific for hockey in those days. And the guy who had really started it officially was Anatoly Tarasov of Soviet Union. And he coached Central Army team, and he was national team coach and assistant coach or co-coach with Arkady Chernishev. So I invited both of them to come. I had a good relationship with the Soviet Federation, and we worked it out. And Dr. Ladislav Horsky, unfortunately, they're all dead now. Horsky was from Bratislava. He was a Slovak, but then it was Czechoslovak. And he did specific off-ice training for goalkeepers of all ages. Tarasov did under 20, 15 years old and up, pros, and Chernishev under 15. And we went to 18 cities. I had Charlie the Czech. He's alive. He lives in Greenwood Lake, New York. Charlie was originally from Czechoslovakia, Prague, and immigrated to the U.S. We met him in Brooklyn. I met him in Brooklyn at the rink, and we became friends, which we still are to this day. He was the interpreter for Gorsky, and the Soviets, they called in. They sent Lev Zakharovich. He's alive. He's in his 80s in Moscow. Good guy. He was the interpreter for the two Soviet coaches. So we went all around. They did a great job. They didn't make much money. We only charged $15 a head per coach. Come to the seminars. They absolutely were sensational, and they sold out everywhere. And it changed the fortunes of our hockey because thousands of coaches, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of coaches were, and lots of kids that we used as the examples in the workouts, learned something great and new that could help them. it influenced our hockey big time. It was a great move. And we thought we were going to lose 10 grand, which was a lot of money then. And we made 16 grand after I got permission to give those guys each a bonus for the great job they did. And so it was a win, 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 win. I was the only one that lost. I was exhausted, feeling carrying medicine balls and weights and ropes and rubber suspenders and all kinds of things on airlines around the country. And then there was a plane crash in Chicago when we were there. Tarasov refused to fly anymore. He said, only if you have Aeroflot. I said, our next stop is Detroit. There's no Aeroflot flights from Chicago to Detroit. So I had to rent the van, and that's how we did the last part of our trip. With a van, with me driving, and it worked out great. It worked out great. It was wonderful. But we're in Niagara Falls, New York. And what I wanted to do in order to increase income and also to include Canada, because we wanted to have a good working relationship with the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association. Dennis McDonald was running it. Great guy, did a great job. He helped me a lot when I was starting out. We put him in border like Seattle, Hancock, Michigan, Duluth, Minnesota, where else? We're Niagara Falls, New York, very close the river from Ontario. We were able to get a lot of Canadian coaches to come, which was great, and it made it worthwhile. So we're in Niagara Falls, and we had a day off. It was a beautiful June day. I said, guys, let's go see the falls. So we went to the falls. Everybody was impressed, except Tarasov. He's a very proud Soviet guy. And I said, you don't think it's nice? He said, yes, it's very nice. But we have better waterfalls than the Soviet Union. So then I took him to, and Chernishev rolled his eyes, and so did the interpreter. I said, it's okay, that's who he is. Let him say it, I love it. Now we go to, because I would get along great with him, but we'd argue once in a while. Then we went to the aquarium, which was great, with dolphins. And they had an aquarium, they still have it. It's above ground, and you could go down below. You could see the dolphins underwater as well as on top. So we started out on top, and Tarasov wanted to go down to see, so we all went down. And we're watching, and I see him make a comment to the interpreter, and both of them laughed. They had a laugh. I walked over and said, Lev, what did Anatoly say? He said, nothing, not important. And of course, Tarasov kept saying, Shkazal, Lova, Shkazal, Lou. Tell Lou. So he told me. He said, Lou, you'll be insulted. I said, no, I won't. What did he say? He said, these Americans amaze me. They have beautiful supermarkets, big buildings we're seeing as we travel across the country. He said, they have more mayonnaise in one supermarket than I can find now in all of Moscow combined. They can do everything. They can even teach fish to fulfill the most difficult tasks. Tell me, why can't they teach their hockey players to make a 3-meter pass? And I found it hysterical, and ironically, very true. It was great. And this went on day after day, week after week. I mean, it was in the height of the Cold War. He was at one of my grandmother's house. So all these guys for dinner in Brooklyn. This wonderful grandmother of mine, an old Italian lady from Sicily, and she prepared an incredible meal. She was in her 80s at the time. She lived to 103. And these guys were so respectful and polite and appreciative to her. They just loved her. That for years after, and this is at the height of this Cold War, he's sitting in a with a pub, at a house in Brooklyn eating spaghetti. And it was wild. When I look back, it's wonderful memories. Every time I would see him, anywhere we were in the world, the first thing he would always say after greeting me, "Hello, babushka," okay? Grandmother, okay? And I put my thumbs up to say yes. He said, "Hello, very, very," in English. He only knew like 5 words. He'd say, "Very, very, very good spaghetti." That's what he would say. And I told my grandmother, she'd get a big kick out of it and ask me how they were doing. And I said, good. They're okay. They're alive. So, yeah, that's about it.
Well, thank you again so much for your time, Lou. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're a pro. Thank you.
This episode of Based on a True Story was produced by me, Dan Lefebvre. I'd like to thank Lou Vairo once again for sharing more about the true story that we saw in the movie Miracle. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Lou has a new autobiography available right now that tells even more stories from his legendary career. So hop into the show notes to find a link to Lou Vairo, the Godfather of U.S. hockey, so you can get your copy right now. Or if you're driving, maybe doing chores around the house, and you just can't check the show notes right now, you can always find that link on the show's home on the web, basedonatruestorypodcast.com/353. Okay, now it's time for the answer to our 2 truths and a lie game from the beginning of the episode. And as a quick refresher, here are the 2 truths and 1 lie again. Number 1, players on Team USA were starstruck by Soviet players. Number 2, Lou says Miracle does not accurately describe the 1980 Olympics USA hockey team. And number 3, Team USA beat the Soviet Union by a score of 4-3 in the gold medal game. Did you catch which one is a lie? Got the answer right here. So let's look at that. The lie is number 3. Team USA beat the Soviet Union in the gold medal game by a score of 4-3. While the Soviet Union was considered the best team in the world at the time, it was only after Team USA beat the Soviet Union that they moved on to the gold medal game, and they beat Finland in that game, and that is how Team USA got the gold medal. You made it to the end. As a one-person production, these episodes would not be possible without the support of Based on a True Story producers. And if you're watching the video version of this, we'll have credits roll at the end, so I would encourage you to stick around for those so you can learn more about how you can get your name in the credits for the next episode. Or if you're listening to the audio version, in the show notes, you'll find a link to learn more over at basedonatruestorypodcast.com/producers. Until next time, thanks so much for spending your time with Lou and I today, and I'll chat with you again really soon.